Have you ever found yourself at the top of a tall building with the irresistible urge to jump? Or perhaps you've been cutting vegetables and just wondered what would happen if you slit your own wrist. Maybe you simply wanted to swerve your car into oncoming traffic just to see what would happen. These are the urges I've been fighting since I was a teenager. Despite this fact, you needn't worry. Because I'm not depressed, nor am I suicidal. In fact, I always considered my life to be mostly decent. Apart from these bizarre tics, I had nothing too substantial to complain about. It's just that instinctual need to control your own destiny, even if the only thing left to control is your own death. I'm sure some of you have felt it already. It's quite a common phenomenon, named the call of the void. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Most of us have these thoughts from one time to another, regardless of your mental state. However, most of us never actually answer that call. Most of us. A few days ago, I finally succumbed to the desperate need to control my own end. And while I didn't exactly experience what is typically considered death, I was able to see what existed beyond the void. And I wish I would have just died instead. It all happened in early morning hours. I was hiking with a couple of friends up a mountain. Seeing as we all had the day off work, we figured we might as well do something mildly healthy. We reached the top within a few hours, and the view that greeted us was breathtaking. Being the prick that I am, and much to the dismay of my friends, I sat myself on the edge with my feet dangling off the cliffside. As I sat on the edge, I once again felt the sudden pull towards the void. An incessant call to just find the truth, to jump, and finally be at peace with myself. Like 1,000 times before, I felt something dark within me, something evil that existed beyond the reach of my conscious mind. With little to no hesitation, I jumped. It wasn't a conscious thought, but merely an instinct pulling me towards my own demise. It's true what they say. When you are inches away from death, everything moves in slow motion. If you're lucky, you'll see the best parts of your life. First kiss, driving a newly purchased car, the sight of a beautiful sunset. Unfortunately, all I saw was an ocean of student debt and countless hours of procrastination spent browsing the internet. Other than the obvious, there were a few funny thoughts running through my head as I rapidly accelerated toward the ground. Did I delete my browser history? Would my dog understand why I left? Would I be missed? Then I hit the ground. Death came in an instant, one that seemed like an eternity. I felt my bones break against the force of the fall. I felt my internal organs crushed to an undefinable mesh, and my blood escaping my body from all available orifices. It was honestly disgusting. After death, I saw no light. No sense of peace to let me know I was finally safe. All that existed in the void was everlasting, empty darkness that I floated through, feeling nothing but regret that I jumped off that damned mountain. I had little time to consider my actions, as I quickly fell back in a physical form, and I found myself standing in a foot of ice-cold water. The water was shallow, but extended endlessly around me, like an ocean of black, tarry liquid gently lit up by the moonlight. Except there wasn't any recognizable lights to be found. Everything just illuminated on its own, barely enough to make out my surroundings, but enough to get around. Even in death, my bones were still broken, my lungs punctured, and my mind devastated by my own weakness. Though I was functional, the pain remained. I screamed for help, begging for someone to get me out of there, but no answer came. Without any better options, I started walking, hours on end of pulling my numb feet through the murky water, wandering throughout the eternal night. Eventually, I saw something that broke the horizon. Just silhouettes that wandered aimlessly around like myself. They were people. I caught up to them quickly, but they weren't there to rescue me. Hundreds and hundreds of broken people. Some with slit throats, some with broken necks, and others entirely crushed to bits. None of them acknowledged my presence. They just proceeded going in no particular direction. I shook them. I tried to yell at them, but nothing seemed enough to demand their attention. After working myself through the crowd, frantically trying to get anyone to see me, finally, one of them took note of me. "Oh no, not another one," a young boy said. Couldn't have been older than 16. "What's going on? Where am I?" I asked, slightly frightened to know the answer. "You're in the void, just like all of us," he stated matter-of-factly. "The void?" "Yeah, you know, le pile du vide. You probably had that sudden urge to crash your car or jump off a building. It's the same story every time someone ends up here." He took a brief pause to let me process the information. "So what year are you from?" he asked. "Excuse me?" "The year. How long ago did you die?" 2019. Why?" 2019? Holy shit. Has it really been that long?" I must have fired questions at him like a machine gun following that statement. But he was kind enough to answer all of them with an oddly based sense of enthusiasm and patience. Though I suppose being patient is not really a virtue when you're in a place where time truly is infinite. He introduced himself to me as Leonard. Like me, he had felt the call of the void, or l'appel du vide, as he so affectionately called it. And after some hesitation, he pulled up his shirt to reveal a completely crushed chest. Apparently, he'd been learning how to drive, happy to finally have some freedom in his life, when he suddenly decided to crash into a tree. That was in 1982. 37 fucking years in the void with no hope of escape. What about the others? I asked as I gestured around to the other anhedonic creatures walking among us. "Oh, they've been here ages. Not many people answer the call, but everyone that does ends up here. The last person I spoke to killed themselves in 1985. That's him over there." Leonard pointed to a man with a slit throat, walking a few yards ahead of us. One of the people who'd ignored me earlier. "Yeah, this place takes a toll on you. Eventually people just kind of degrade. They turn to autopilot and eventually fall behind." Falling behind would be the ultimate fate for all of us, Leonard explained. Depending on your mental strength, you could last a certain amount of time before the void ate away at you, leaving you as nothing more than an empty husk of your former self. How come you're the only one still sane? I haven't given up yet. I know there has to be a way out of here, and I'll be damned if I succumb to this fucking nightmare without finding it. Whatever exit Leonard dreamt of, it never showed itself to us. We followed the lifeless people, still marching faithfully toward the horizon. And every now and then, someone would fall behind and simply stop walking. I thought about what happened to those people, but Leonard told me it was best to just not think about it. How am I supposed to not think about it? I asked. Easy. Don't think about a pink elephant. Don't what? It's a paradox. If you know you're not supposed to think about something, you're absolutely going to think about it. I suppose that makes sense. He patted me on the back, surprisingly mature for someone his age. Even so, I suppose he had actually existed there for several decades. When I find a way out of here, you'll come with me, won't you? Leonard asked. Yeah, of course. This can't be the end. Time passed, and I tried my best to keep the spirits up between myself and Leonard. We shared stories from our lives, hopes, and dreams. I told him about what happened to the world in the almost 4 decades he had missed, and he excitedly listened. He was particularly interested in how far video games had come. How often do you see new people? I asked. Not very often, and most only survive a few days. I think you have to be in a pretty bad state of mind to actually answer the call of the void. Not like us, mind you. He said, keeping time was an impossible feat there. But to the best of my estimation, years passed. Every now and then, another unfortunate soul answered the call and joined our march, only to fall behind in a few days, entirely skipping the autopilot phase. Our talks weren't enough, and Leonard slowly started to become more tired, less talkative. He started saying that he just wanted to keep walking without focusing on anything else. Before I could find a way to stop it, he had turned into one of the others. He stopped interacting with me completely and didn't even acknowledge my existence. Time had taken its toll, and it had taken him with it. While he still marched alongside all of us, there was nothing left inside his soul. I spent the next part of eternity on my own, desperately begging not to lose myself in the void like so many others had before me. For each march across the horizon, more people started dropping out from our march, left behind to fade into the background. And when the time came, Leonard stopped walking as well. I tried so damn hard to drag him with me, but I had become weak, and nothing I could do would save him. I hated myself, but I had no will to fight back anymore. Ages, eons passed, and every so often, I found myself staring behind the group, away into the distance, hoping Leonard would come running. But instead of his familiar face, I saw something else. A light suddenly glaring a couple of miles behind the march. It was magical, mystical, horrifying. 1,000 different emotions built up inside me. I was utterly terrified, but I knew it would be my best bet to walk towards the light. I yelled, tried my best to get the others' attention, but they ignored me, as they always had. And without any other choice, I ran towards the light on my own. The light shined before me, growing in intensity for each passing step. And long before I could reach it, the light all but blinded me. Within a second, my bones stopped hurting, and I could finally breathe normally again. And as suddenly as it had started, I found myself sitting on the edge of a cliff, with my friends yelling for me to back away. Only seconds had passed since that fateful day when I answered the call. I was alive again. I stumbled to my feet and quickly stepped back in shock. And without hesitating, I embraced both of my long-lost friends. For them, only a moment had elapsed, so my misplaced moment of affection slightly confused them. We spent a couple hours on the mountain together, with me just staring into the beautifully lit up horizon, being warmed by the sun I so dearly missed. And then we went home. A few days went by, and I started to wonder if it had all been real. Despite spending an eternity in the void, it seemed so fantastically distant, but the memory of Leonard lingered in my mind. I spent some time researching him online. He'd given me his name, which city he lived in, and how he had been killed. All of that combined was enough to dig up some newspaper cutout posted online as a memory. Years later, when the internet became popular, his picture matched perfectly with what I remembered, and the story added up. There was no doubt in my mind anymore. Leonard was real, and I had left him to vanish, alone in the void with no one to help. It didn't take much more for my life to fall to shambles. I tried focusing on my work and to find any resemblance of a love life. Nothing worked. Sleep eluded me every night, and the thoughts of my lost friend dug deeper into my subconscious, begging for my attention. There's not much more to say about the story, but please, if you ever feel the call of the void, turn around and just go home. Don't question it. Don't let it be anything more than a curious thought you ignore. When it comes to me, it's too late. I already know what's there, and I can't live with it, leaving all those people behind. If you ever hear from me again, just know that I went back to save my friend, that I tried my best to do the right thing. Proximity awareness is the feeling you get in the dark when you know something is nearby, but you can't see it. We've all experienced that creepy sensation. We blindly wave our arms around a lightless cellar, hoping to make contact with the unknown object for greater clarity. If we are deeply afraid, we might even pretend there's nothing there at all. Denial can be a comfort in small doses, but it can't change reality. If there's something with you in the dark, then to pretend otherwise won't help. That cobweb you just walked through probably had a large spider in it. That thing which slithered across your foot in the middle of the night was either a rat or a snake. And the evil presence you feel brooding beside you in the darkness, well, we both know what that is. I couldn't explain why I never got around to changing the light bulb in the basement. Over the years, that windowless dungeon with creaky hinges and musty odor became the catch-all for every broken piece of furniture or unwanted junk for 3 generations. Why my family didn't just sell, give away, or haul off the mounting collection of unwanted items was beyond me. Explanations aren't always easy. By the time I grew up and inherited the old house, it had already been a long-standing family tradition for as long as I could remember. Grandpa kept the cellar door bolted shut with an iron padlock. He only unlocked it when there was a new item to drag down into the basement. My siblings and I would beg him to be the one to take that outdated lamp or broken radio down there. It was spooky, but that was part of the excitement. It was the only occasion we would ever get to see the cluttered mess of discarded furniture and timeless spider webs. In truth, the mystique created by that locked door far outweighed the reality. For both my grandparents, the reason for saving everything was the practical virtue of frugality. They survived the Great Depression when times were incredibly hard. They didn't believe in throwing away anything for fear they might actually need it again. My father kept their pointless behavior alive because Grandma and Grandpa drove home the importance of saving everything just in case. And so it went that I eventually inherited the tradition. I grew up in the time of hippies and post-war prosperity. There was no plausible justification for me to save those worn-out rocking chairs with broken rails or lamps that no longer switched on. I just followed the time-worn pattern of hoarding junk for no real reason at all. It's what they always did with unwanted things, so it was good enough for me. Not once in the time did any of us retrieve or reuse an item that was relegated there, though. Once it went down the cellar stairs, it was abandoned and forgotten. For the past year or two, that semi-annual journey into the dusty abyss has been carried out by me without the benefit of light. I always forget that bulb is blown until I flip the impotent switch and am reminded. Then it comes flooding back to me. Every time it happens, I make a half-hearted resolution to stop putting it off. But then I do anyways because I'm lazy, and also because reaching the bare light socket requires a tall stepladder. The process is a logistical hassle. It's also impossible to carry a flashlight while carrying armloads of things at the same time. For no more often than I descend down there, I just let it slide until next time. Even though I'm a grown man now, I still have to push myself a little to do it. I put one foot in front of the other and descend a dozen or so wooden steps to the hard cellar floor. One blind step at a time. Eventually, my eyes adjust slightly until I make out the murky landscape of 70 years of discarded refuse. I scanned the clutter for an unoccupied space to deposit the newest addition of junk to the pile, but I was distracted by a creepy, uneasy feeling. In the darkness, I sensed something very near me in the walkway. It was so unnerving that I couldn't shake it. Despite the impossibleness of the situation, I definitely wasn't alone. The considerable presence in my proximity was very odd, and yet radiated a distinct level of fury. Whatever it was, it didn't utter a sound, but I knew it was there, and it was very angry. I could feel the unknown entity watching me intently. My arms were full, and I didn't know what to do. Should I pretend not to realize I was alone down there? Every instinct I had was to drop the armload of useless junk and run away screaming. Naturally, I would have hightailed it back up the stairs to the relative safety of the light and slammed the door shut. Maybe the unwanted thing in the cellar just wanted to be left alone. That would have been the best case scenario. By my stiff reaction, it surely knew I was aware of its feral aura. It would have been easiest just to set everything down in a nearby corner and slowly back away in a non-threatening manner. That would have been the safest approach, but for some inexplicable reason, I felt compelled to address the unknown thing lurking in my unlit basement. I don't know the circumstances of why you're here, but I mean you no harm, and I hope the same is true for you. I only intend to place these old items in the corner, and then I'll be on my way. There is no reason we both can't coexist in this place. I won't bother or disturb you any further. There was an extended silence, made even more excruciating by the chilling circumstances. I was at an extreme disadvantage. I couldn't see whatever was just a few feet away from me. At last, a hoarse rasp interrupted to offer a detente. Just like all the other things down here in the cellar, I am unloved and forgotten. I was never given a name. but I am your uncle. Like the rest of the unwanted things down here, I was abandoned many years ago by your grandparents. They were ashamed of my severe physical deformities. I have been chained to this floor for more than 40 years while spying on my happy family from the shadows. I never dared to show my face to anyone else walking above me. And only you make the solo trek down here to discard your refuse now. I can only conclude that the others are either dead or gone. I was stunned and completely speechless. I didn't know how to react to the horrific revelation or how to respond. The fierce aura of animosity I sensed earlier was gone. Perhaps earlier it was misguided fear or shame that masqueraded as rage and contempt. I moved closer to the direction of its low, wavering voice. I offer you my deepest sympathy. I am so sorry for the horrible misdeeds you've experienced. Grandpa kept the door strictly locked. All these years, I had no idea you were down here amongst the discarded furniture and debris. None of us did, but you must already realize that you've listened to everyone talk upstairs throughout the years. Both Grandpa and Grandma are dead and buried now. My dad himself died last year, and my sister wants no part of this place. Only I know your secret now. He was quiet as I spoke, my words resonating in the air. The tormented soul beside me in the darkness offered no immediate response. I hoped my sincere words brought him some solace for the incredible injustice he received and the rage that surely dwelled within. I suppose the light bulb being out overhead is no accident either, is it? I added with realization. How is it that you, survived down here so long? I think you know the answer to that, he croaked weakly. Indeed I do. Our hellish nightmare started in the early 2000s, during the golden age of MSN Messenger and MySpace, when the internet was young enough that no one had the faintest clue what they were doing, and malicious links flew around each and every inbox, appealing to the dumbest parts of our mind. Emails containing viruses, downloads, with promises of premium porn or alarming messages such as, "Is this naked photo really of you?" Or perhaps Nigerian princes offering unthinkable fortunes if you just borrow them some money. The internet is and always has been a horrible place, but among the dirt that circulated, there were also some lesser-known, useful innovations. One of these hidden gold mines offered a product called the Dreamweaver. It was a device meant to control your dreams, offering some alleviation from insomnia, anxiety, mania, anything troublesome haunting the back of your mind. And while I was far too young to need such a thing, my brother, Alex, turned out to be the perfect candidate. The year was 2005, and I had just turned 7. Alex was 11 years my senior, and while I was old enough to realize how fucked up my brother had been due to his own childhood, my young mind couldn't comprehend the meaning of psychiatric disorders. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, agoraphobia, night terrors, and delusions of persecution. My brother had a myriad of different issues, which meant he frequently left to spend time in facilities dealing with these diseases. As much as I loved him, these days he spent away were blissfully quiet, because whenever he slept in the house, he'd wake up screaming from his nightmares, and no prescription medication seemed to work. Now, at an older age, I realized our father had been an abusive piece of shit which most likely triggered half the issues Alex dealt with. But following my birth and a vicious battle with cancer, he presumably changed to become a better man. But for my brother, it was far too late. Our father had a brain tumor, stage 4, inoperable, and for the better part of that year, my family just assumed he'd pass away. That was until some company offered a miracle cure no one had ever heard about, and by a bizarre twist of fate, he had been cured. Years passed. Alex turned 18, but the memories of his horrible childhood lingered. During Father's time in remission, Alex had just gotten his very own credit card and could finally order stuff online. After ordering some comic books and video games, he was given a link for the fantastic product that was Dreamweaver. It arrived within the week, packed in a perfectly black box, marked with nothing more than Artifacts Dreamweaver. It contained a pair of earphones and a set of skull electrodes that emitted weak electrical impulses, which could control the user's dreams to perfection. He didn't hesitate to try it out, and that same night, Alex slept in uninterrupted peace, not once awakening in terror, for the first time in over a decade. Though the device only helped with his sleep, it was a fantastic start. A few weeks of silence passed, and I finally built up the guts to beg Alex to explain the device to me. He said that it had been specifically programmed to provide a personal dream sequence based on the user's ailment, be it anxiety, stress, or depression. Of course, as a 10-year-old, the concept of controlling one's dreams was the coolest thing I'd ever heard about, and I gleefully asked to borrow it, just for one night. A request that he promptly refused. "Come on, Frank, I need this to sleep, you know that, right?" he told me. "Please, just once, pretty please." "It only works on adults anyways. When you're older, I promise to let you borrow it, alright?" It was clearly a lie, but as a kid, I thought Alex was the wisest person in the world. With a mostly absent father and a severely depressed mother, he was the closest thing I had to a role model. Years went by, and the night terrors were kept at bay. But while one problem had been solved, another quickly came around to replace it. Alex started to sleepwalk. He started waking up in strange places. At first, on the floor by his bed, not a particularly big deal, but it quickly escalated. He woke up on the couch, in the kitchen, then outside in the garden. He kept using the device despite his unconscious ventures, citing that it beat waking up screaming, to which I had to agree. It quickly became the norm. We started locking doors. We put a child barrier on the stairs to prevent him from falling down, breaking his neck, and we even went as far as putting a bell around his foot. But despite our most valiant efforts, he found a way to remove the bell, unlock the doors, and get past the barriers, all while unconscious. I had just turned 19, and I was old enough to notice more and more how much my brother struggled. He dropped out of high school, never to return, and after a while, he barely left the house due to crippling anxiety, which also made it impossible for him to hold down a job. At the age of 30, he still lived at home with no future in sight. It pained me to see him like that. I loved my brother, I truly did, but our relationship had gotten strained over time. And while I wanted to move on in life, he stayed behind, unable and unwilling to get help. All he ever did was sleep wearing that damned Dreamweaver device. It had become his one source of happiness in an otherwise shitty existence. Then one night, I awoke to horrific, blood-curdling screams. I jolted out of bed in response to the sound, my heart racing at 100 miles per hour as I realized it wasn't Alex screaming, but my mom. I rushed upstairs to see the bedroom doors opened. They were always locked due to Alex's sleepwalking, but he'd somehow gotten past. And the sight I was met with on the inside is something that will haunt me until the day I die. Alex stood at the foot of their bed, wearing the Dreamweaver, holding a bloody knife covered in pieces of what I can only assume were gray matter. In bed, my father lay dead, his abdomen split open from top to bottom, and his skull bashed to pieces to the point where he no longer had a face anyone could recognize. All the while, Alex didn't move. My mother started to scream again, unable to do anything but stare at the horrific mess ahead of her. Minutes passed, and none of us moved. We just stood frozen in fear, staring at each other. After a while, Alex just put down the knife and went back to bed. He'd been sleepwalking, killed our father while unconscious, never realizing what had happened until the police arrived and took him away. I don't remember much about the following weeks. I was put into therapy to deal with the multitude of things I'd repressed over the past years. Though I can't for the life of me remember a single word about what was said between myself and the shrink. My father, as horrible of a man as he was, he didn't deserve a death like that. They didn't send Alex to prison, but to a psychiatric facility just outside of town, a place they said could help him feel normal again, though I doubt he'll ever be able to leave. That was 2 years ago, and I haven't spoken to him since. It's not that I'm angry with him. He wasn't even awake. But I can't get the image of blood and brain matter covering his face out of my head. I don't know what sent Alex over the edge, the abuse he experienced as a kid, or the years of mental illness slowly etching away at his mind. I just know that I haven't slept through the night since, and that I'm slowly losing myself just like he did. 2 years, sleeping 3 hours a night. I'm surprised I'm still going. Tomorrow, I'll go visit the storage room where we put Alex's things. I'm worried it'll bring back memories from that awful night, but I'm also excited because his Dreamweaver is stored there. Finally, I can see what a wonderful world was created for him. And even better, maybe I can finally get a good night's sleep. My house was built in 1904. It's a single-family home, wood frame, standing on a concrete block foundation. I have been living here for about 12 years. Of all the weird things that my siblings and me have seen or heard in this house, this one event is my favorite. This happened to my brother about 10 years ago. My brother and his best friend had started a garage band playing mostly Spanish rock, alternative music, but in Spanish. His friends could only get together on Sunday afternoons. They would practice into the early evening, and then they would usually call it quits by 8 p.m. This was the time I usually showed up and went to bed, because I worked the graveyard shift. This happened in late fall, so the days were getting shorter. They had just finished a long session when the decision to head to someone else's house came about. My brother handed his car keys to his buddy so they could load up the equipment. Everyone had filed out of the basement, but the tricky part was that they needed to walk all the way to the back of the basement, up the back stairs, through the kitchen doorway, down the hall into the living room, and out into the front porch. Everyone was outside sitting in my brother's truck waiting for him. My brother was walking up the back stairs when he remembered that he had left his pancakes in a to-go container sitting on a speaker in the basement. He made the decision to go back. Now, the basement is not clean. With full sight lines, there had been partitions made, and the boiler and main heating unit are right smack in the middle. So after my brother walks back, he's about to retrieve his food container when out of the corner of his eye, he sees it. It is a shadowy figure right at his peripheral vision. This feeling of dread and uneasiness washes over my brother. We had been taught, if you are in the presence of a spirit or ghost, and you felt a bad vibe, to say a quick prayer or to cuss at it. My brother chose the latter. He basically just told it, "Hey, fuck you, I don't have time for this shit." He started to walk to the back of the basement and briskly up the stairs, closing the doors and turning off the lights as he was walking out. The last light switch is on the opposite side of the door. Luckily, the door was open and the light from the street lamp was flooding in the living room with its amber light. My brother said he felt something at his back, but at no point did he turn around. As he flicked the last switch, the living room went dark, as did the rest of the house. As he stepped out, he pulled on the door, closing it behind him. Still holding his food container in one hand, he jogged down the few porch steps. He walked towards the front gate. Our house resides far from the main street, essentially having a large front yard, but no rear garage. As he closed the gap between himself and his friend-laden truck, he kind of smiled and thought things over in his head. Mad at himself for spooking out when there was no reason. He climbed into the driver's side of the truck, putting on his seatbelt and getting ready to pull out of the parking spot directly in front of the house, when one of his friends asked, "Hey, wait, what about your brother? Isn't he coming with us?" My brother answered, "What do you mean? He went to work early tonight. He's already gone. Do you see his car anywhere?" The next question they asked, "So then who was walking behind you when you were leaving the house?"